Good morning, brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 36 of Be With Me. And I'm going to emphasize a war today because Paul emphasizes a war. He says he's not clueless to the conflict. So yesterday we talked about Paul endorsing his ministry by meekness and humility and lowliness and accessibility. And our tagline yesterday was, when someone has lost their way spiritually, sometimes the only language they can hear is one spoken in whispers. And that's one of the reasons why Paul presents himself with humility and meekness and lowliness. But we're going to move towards a war today. And Paul is going to say, I'm not powerless. I've been given authority and weapons and ability to start destroying stuff, and I'm not clueless. I understand what's at risk here, and I understand that we are at war. The problem is that he has... there is rising against him an opposition. And he mentions it in chapter 10 here in verses 2, 10, and 12. And he says, some people are suspecting me of walking according to the flesh. And then in verse 10, it says, the letters you write are weighty and strong, but bodily your presence is weak and your speech is of no account. So he gets some oppositions to the way he is. And then verse 12, these people are commending themselves without understanding. So he's getting some criticism. So I'm going to read chapter 10, starting in verse 1, and Paul's going to start with his humility, but then he's going to kind of get to this position of strength. So here it is, 10:1, 2 Corinthians. I, Paul, myself, entreat you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ, I who am humble when face to face with you, but bold toward you when I am away. I beg of you that when I am present, I may not have to show boldness with such confidence as I count on showing against some who suspect us of walking according to the flesh. So he's mentioning the bad guys, the enemies there. And then listen to this. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power. And with this result, to destroy strongholds, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. So he starts with this posture of humility, but it's not just humility. It's not just, meek and mild. It's this humility with divine power. The first thing he says is, look, I understand that we are on a war footing here, but the weapons that I'm going to fight with are not of the flesh. He doesn't tell you exactly what there are, but I think they are truth and faith and salvation and indwelling of the Spirit and the Word. But he concludes and he says, these things have power. Well, what kind of a power? Not my power, but divine power. So the opposition that he's getting, Paul is saying, I'm going to fight against those and be at war with those and speak boldly, starting with humility. But the big thing is that they're going to engage a divine power. And how do we know that? Well, when you exert this divine power, it starts knocking stuff down. The result is it destroys arguments. It destroys strongholds. I think it gets people to change their minds, which is what the stronghold is. It destroys opinion. And what kind of opinion? Lofty opinion, which is prideful opinions, or I think this is best kind of a thing. And it's raised against the knowledge of God. So it's my opinion versus the truth of God, which I think is a pretty good definition of what pride is. And so not only you're knocking stuff down, you're taking captives. You're taking captives of thought, and then you're getting people to actually obey Christ. So it starts with thoughts, destroying ones, taking captive thoughts, and resulting in obedience. And if that doesn't work, then there's a readiness to be bold and a readiness to punish. So Paul, I think, is is really girding his loins here. He's saying, I'm starting with humility. I'm ready to open up a can of boldness if necessary. I'm ready to punish disobedience. But I'm going to start with an understanding that I am on a war footing against people that are sort of arguing against me. Primarily, the argument is in people's heads. It is with words. It is with influence. It's in this marketplace of ideas is kind of the nice way of saying it. And Paul is saying, I'm willing to step into this marketplace of ideas. I'm willing to engage this divine power. So I'm going to start with my humility, my personal humility, and I'm going to use a divine power and start to knock stuff down, start to destroy stuff, start to knock some strongholds and stubbornness and lofty opinions and pride. Start taking some prisoners, start taking some thoughts captive, and hopefully change action. So I think Paul is saying that this is primarily a battle of ideas. It's a battle of thoughts. It's of words, opinions, pride. It's a battle of the heart primarily. And don't misunderstand here. I'm starting with humility, and I know that I'm fighting a war here. I know that I'm in a battle. I know that captives need to be taken and stuff needs to get knocked down. But the way I'm doing it is the way that Christ did it, which is primarily I'm going to start with humility. I'm going to start with meekness. I'm going to start with lowliness. And then I'm going to engage a divine power. So I think if you want to conclude with a math equation here, is Paul's lowliness, his humility, plus this divine power equals success in war. Thanks for listening. Go be at war today, humbly and with a divine power.